The ballroom glittered with gold and laughter, a cathedral of wealth where champagne sparkled like liquid sunlight. Beneath the chandeliers, the city's elite moved in effortless grace, their smiles polished, their laughter rehearsed. But in the far corner of that perfect world stood a little girl in scuffed shoes and a faded blue dress. Her name was Anna Parker, just 7 years old, and her hands trembled over the ivory keys of a grand piano that looked too big for someone so small. Moments earlier, a voice had cut through the laughter, deep, confident, cruel. "Play something for us, little one," said Alexander Gray, a self-made millionaire from New York. "If you can impress me, I'll adopt you." The room roared with laughter. To them, it was a joke. To Anna, it was hope. She didn't care about the chandeliers or the designer gowns. All she wanted was a family, someone to love her, someone to stay. As her fingers hovered above the keys, the crowd leaned in, amused and expectant. But Anna wasn't there to entertain. She was there to fight for a home. The moment her hands touched the piano, the world around her disappeared. What came next silenced a room full of millionaires, and changed 2 lives forever, because that night in New York City, music became more than sound. It became a heartbeat. A promise. A beginning. The night was cold outside the ballroom, the kind of cold that seeps through your shoes and settles in your bones. But inside the Gray Foundation Charity Gala, warmth spilled from every chandelier. Glasses clinked, diamonds glittered, and laughter danced like champagne bubbles. The guests were America's wealthiest, CEOs, politicians, and socialites, gathered to support children's charities, though most were here to be seen rather than to care. And somewhere among the polished marble and designer gowns, Anna Parker waited, small, forgotten, and clutching the hem of her worn dress. She didn't belong here, but she had been invited, not as a guest, but as entertainment. The orphanage director had told her that if she played well, maybe someone would notice her. Maybe someone would want her. When the master of ceremonies introduced her, a wave of amusement rippled through the crowd. A child pianist from an orphanage, how quaint. Then came the voice that changed everything. "Play something for us," Alexander Gray said, his smile sharp as glass. He was tall, broad-shouldered, mid-40s, the kind of man who commanded every room he entered. "If you impress me," he added, raising his glass, "I'll adopt you myself." Laughter exploded. Cameras flashed. To them, it was another performance, but for Anna, it was life or nothing. She climbed onto the piano bench, legs dangling, heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Her fingers touched the keys, cold, smooth, unfamiliar. She played one note. Then another. It echoed through the room like a whisper against thunder. The first melody stumbled. A few people chuckled. Alexander leaned back, smirking, but then Anna closed her eyes. She wasn't in that ballroom anymore. She was back in the orphanage basement, where a broken piano had been her only friend. She remembered playing for the moonlight that spilled through the cracked window, for the shadows that listened when no one else did. Her fingers moved faster now, guided not by skill, but by memory. Every lonely night, every whispered prayer, every time she had cried herself to sleep wishing for a mother's hug, the room began to still. Conversations faded. A hush spread, soft and electric. Her music was imperfect, raw, but it carried something none of them could buy, truth, and in that truth, Alexander Gray felt something stir. He hadn't felt it in years. As Anna's melody rose, his mind drifted back to a time before the suits and the skyscrapers, to a tiny house in Ohio, where his mother used to play piano on Sunday mornings. She died when he was 10. He hadn't listened to music since. Now, sitting in that glittering ballroom, Alexander felt his armor crack. When Anna struck the final note, the silence that followed was absolute. Not a glass clinked. Not a breath dared to break it. Anna's eyes opened slowly. She looked up at the man who held her future in a careless promise. For a long moment, Alexander said nothing. Then, almost unconsciously, he stood. The guests clapped, a standing ovation of guilt and awe, but Alexander barely heard them. He walked toward her, every step heavy with realization. When he reached her, he knelt. "Anna," he said softly, voice trembling, "you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. From now on, you're not alone." Her eyes widened, searching his for any sign of mockery. There was none, only truth. The applause swelled like a storm, but all she heard was that one sentence echoing in her heart: "You're not alone." Adoption wasn't easy. Papers, interviews, legal hurdles, all tangled in bureaucracy. But Alexander didn't stop. For the first time in his life, he found purpose beyond profit. He learned how to pack lunches, how to braid hair, badly, how to show up for school recitals instead of corporate meetings. Anna, at first, flinched when he raised his voice or reached out suddenly. Years of neglect don't fade overnight. But slowly, through patience and gentle love, her walls came down. Sometimes, when she played the piano at home, now their home, Alexander would sit beside her, tapping random keys, laughing when he hit the wrong ones. The mansion, once silent, now echoed with imperfect music and the laughter of a child. 2 years later, Alexander Gray returned to the same charity gala, but this time, not as the host flaunting wealth. He came as a father. Anna, now 9, sat beside him in a simple white dress. When the host announced the night's performer, she stepped forward. The crowd recognized her instantly, the orphan girl who had melted a millionaire's heart. As she began to play, there was no mockery, no laughter, only reverence. Her music filled the ballroom again, but this time it wasn't a plea for love. It was gratitude. It was healing. When she finished, Alexander joined her on stage and said into the microphone, "2 years ago, I thought success meant never needing anyone. This little girl taught me that true wealth is measured not by what you own, but by who you love." The audience rose to their feet. Many cried openly. Anna smiled shyly, clutching his hand, and for the first time, she truly felt what she had dreamed of for years, home. Anna Parker went on to study music at Juilliard. Alexander continued his philanthropic work, funding scholarships for orphans across America. Every Christmas, they would visit the old orphanage together. Anna would play the same dusty piano that started it all, its broken keys now lovingly restored, while children gathered around, eyes wide with wonder. And when people asked Alexander what inspired his kindness, he would always say the same thing: "A little girl reminded me that love, when given freely, can rewrite even the coldest story." Because sometimes, the smallest hearts make the loudest music, and sometimes, one act of kindness can echo forever. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in second chances, because no matter how broken the past may be, love always wins.